All right, everyone. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jason Levine, and thank you so much for joining us today on this stream on the Adobe Video Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, and YouTube. Wonderful to see you all. This is a very special broadcast today, and it's wonderful to be back on the Facebook page because we have two esteemed guests, and we're going to be talking about how to accelerate editing in Premiere Pro. Now, we had a stream like this a couple of weeks, I guess it's a couple of months back, about sort of performance and stability, where I brought on some Adobe guests. So my first guest, one of my first esteemed guests, is also one of my Adobe colleagues. Her name is Caroline Sears. She's part of the AdobeCare team. Hello, Caroline. Wonderful to see you today.
Hi, Jason. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining. And then we have yet another, an extended member of our Adobe family who's really going to talk very specifically about hardware considerations in terms of how to accelerate editing. His name is Matt Bach from Puget Systems. Hello, Matt.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Great to see you, man. So I thought, before we get started, of course, we're coming to everyone here live on multiple networks. So I always love to give a couple of quick shout outs. You can already see we've got some Adobe people in here. We've got Gustavo. We've got Francis from the Premiere team. Stephanie Reed, how are you doing? Felix Lewis, MC Nasir, Abhishek, Stefan, Frank, what's up? Get to work, Levine. Always good to see you, dude. Mahesh. All right. Jacob Brothers. Hello. Happy to see you all. So now, Caroline, before we get started, I thought both of you could kind of give just little quick intros. Now, I know you're an editor. Before coming to Adobe, you were an editor by trade, and maybe you could talk a little bit about how you kind of got into the AdobeCare system. And I wanted to point out to everybody that if you've ever tweeted at AdobeCare, at least once or even more than once, there's a very good chance you've gotten a reply, and you probably noticed a little note from Caroline. So it was probably she among a few others who've answered you. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you got started with that.
Sure. Yeah, I was freelance editing for a while, and it was just, it's tough being your own boss, and I was living in Texas at the time, and I wanted to come to California, and so I applied for gigs, and I was applying for video editing positions, and then I applied to one that was like completely blank. All it said was video editor, and I was like, well, I've already applied to every other video editing position in the Bay Area, so I'm going to apply anyway. And then later they called me and they were just like, hey, this is actually not a video editing position. It's for tech support for video editing. So you'll be a video editor helping other video editors. And I'm like, okay, well, what's the company? And they're like, do you know Adobe? And I'm like,
right.
Yeah, I do. So yeah, and that was really appealing to me. And it's been a huge learning opportunity. That was the main thing that got me psyched about it is, by helping other people solve their problems, then the next time I'm working on a personal project and I encounter this problem, I'm like, I know how to fix that,
Totally. And just to get so embedded in the community as well. And really, and this is something which has changed radically at Adobe over the last couple of years in particular. We're just out there more, right? I mean, literally your name, if you look at AdobeCare posts, it's probably 1 in 3, if not more, that I see in terms of responses. So it's really wonderful, all the work that you're doing. We're so lucky to have you. And Matt, from what I understand, now you've actually been, and correct me, you've been kind of working with Puget since like your late teens or something. Did I hear that right?
Yeah. So Puget we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. So we've been in business as long as you've been at Adobe.
Wow. Yeah. Congratulations.
And this is my 18th year, I think, actually at Puget. Situation's a little bit different. The company president is John Bach, is my older brother. So I was kind of
nice.
The younger brother helping out when I was, I think it was like a sophomore or junior in high school. And I've been there ever since. But a little background. So Puget Systems, we're a workstation manufacturer. Started off like a lot of computer companies in like the gaming kind of stuff. And but more and more we've found ourselves gravitating towards workstations. And like the Adobe suite is a big part of what we do. And my role at Puget, I'm not one of the sales guys. I guess technically I'm part of marketing, but kind of my role and my team is we look at all the hardware that comes out from like Intel and AMD and NVIDIA, and we look at the software that's out there from Adobe and others, and kind of try to pair the two together correctly, because hardware is changing constantly, software is changing constantly. Like on hardware, they're doing some crazy things, and it takes software. Sometimes it takes software a few years to catch up. Sometimes they're actually ahead of the game. And so it's just constantly changing. And our role is basically to figure out what the best thing is for individual people's workflow, because someone who's editing like drone footage is going to be different than a cinematographer who's shooting on RED cameras or REs.
Right.
And so it just comes down to what's the right pairing. And so that's a big part of what we do. So in some ways, it's kind of what AdobeCare and Caroline's doing, like after like someone has a computer already, of fixing those problems, like as far as like workflow. We try to solve a lot of those problems in terms of like hardware and equipment.
Right. And you're really famous for benchmark testing. And I know we're going to talk and go kind of deeper into that, because this is one of those things where I think a lot of people want this information, but a lot of times these are simply presented as just, online documents. And of course, look, you can read, this performs 10 times faster, and this is 4,000. It's but until you actually see it happen. And again, as you just said, like every configuration based on that person's media needs they're different, right? Yeah. So you really do apples to apples comparisons here to show like, this is what you're going to get with this kind of system using this kind of footage in this environment. And
it's really, really tough too, because there are so many different codecs out there. There's so many different resolutions. There's so many different effects you can use and plugins. And so like you mentioned, we do a lot of benchmarking. That's one of the unique things for us. We're kind of a weird mix of hardware manufacturer, like Workstations, and like reviewer, like a hardware reviewer.
Right.
So we kind of do both sides, which actually works nice because we often get a lot more hardware than like what a reviewer would have access to.
Right.
Right. But the one thing I've learned is that as much of like all the testing and benchmarking we do, that is kind of just like a generic answer. It tells you kind of how much faster like this configuration would be than another. But we're doing more and more for our customers. We tell them like, send us a project. Like send us a project, and then like, okay, you're considering these 2 or 3 different configurations. We'll load up the project on those 2 systems and see how it actually performs, because, we're going to be talking probably a lot here about like H.264 codec, but man, like whether it's 10-bit or 8-bit makes a big difference. The FPS, like even the camera it was recorded on seems to sometimes make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
So you just kind of have to try to get that media from the customer of what are they doing so we can load it on something, because otherwise it's just a generic, it's better than like looking at a gaming benchmark, but it's not going to be 100% perfect.
Absolutely. And I think Caroline, and I know this directly because I know there have been many times even when I do this, but I know Caroline, you too, it's like, well, can you share the project? And then you just get like the project file, but not the media. It's tough. There's just so many factors involved. All right. So, and I just want to, before we even get started, again, from my buddy Frank here, I'm pulling it up on screen. AdobeCare has helped me more than a few times on Twitter. So I want to emphasize to everybody again, if you've got issues, if you've got things going on, you need to reach out. You can always reach out to me at Beetlejace, but tag AdobeCare. They're really there. They're really listening. They're really trying to help. And one of them, they are here. All right.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I'm glad that we were able to get you your answers. And there's a whole team of people that I work with, and we're staffed around the clock. So day or night, hit us up.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, and similarly here, Matt, for you and your team from Felix Lewis, Puget has been a great resource. And if they sold to Europe, I would have bought from them.
Overseas is just... We did it for a little while, but we're not quite big enough to handle all of that kind of stuff. Oh, it's a nightmare exporting.
You've got votes for it. That's all I'm here to do, is to facilitate. Okay, so I'll tell you what. So what are we gonna look at first, Matt? I think you were gonna start with some hardware decoding stuff. Am I right?
Yeah. This is it was in the beta for a little while, and now it's actually in the release version. So the 14.5 update, and it's absolutely amazing. So a little bit of background on some of this. Everyone's worked with H.264 or HEVC, media. It's, cell phones all shoot with it. A lot of drones, tons of stuff will shoot with this. But, it's a great codec. It gives you a great quality and a small file size, but it's really, really hard to process. If anyone who's worked with it, they've dealt with it. So I have 2 versions of Premiere actually here. I went back a bit ago to the 2019 version so that I could have both running at the same time. Because if they're major versions, you can actually install them side by side, which is great if you need to do that. So this does not have any GPU acceleration, and that's what was added, was GPU decoding was the recent thing. And so this is some footage from a DJI Mavic 2. First thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to go into the source window, and I'm just going to click, and just kind of see, okay, so it takes like a click, and then it takes a second. Click, takes a second. If I go to the new version of Premiere Pro, and this is using GPU decoding, If I just click, it's just there immediately. So that's just, it makes such a big difference, even for just like going through your source window. Scrubbing too, kind of see like scrubbing on the new version, it's nice and smooth. It's always hard with streams. You never know quite sure how much is
it's
chopped up from the stream.
It's looking phenomenal. Yeah, it's looking great. It's real time.
And then the old version, it's there's a
Love
couple.
it.
Yeah.
And then again to the new version, so you can kind
go
of
the
see
new one. Oh yeah.
So much smoother.
It's like satin.
Yeah. The other thing too is so oftentimes if you are on a using the old mode, the software decoding, which has been in Premiere forever, it do okay with like forward playback, 1 or 2x if you wanted to use JKL. What really is a problem though is going in reverse. So actually, I'm gonna come here, and so this is the old version. I'm just gonna hit J to go in reverse. So I've hit it. It's going. Like, you're not going to really be using this for editing. Like, it's not great.
Right.
New version.
And just to be clear, people have, and we've kind of struggled through it, but this is, so that's very familiar, right? I think anybody seeing that is going to go, yeah, that's kind of what I've
experienced. And there are solutions for it. Like, I think we might talk about proxies in a little bit. Like, you can always make proxies. You can always transcode. But just so we have this thing here, so I'll come onto the new version. So this is using GPU decoding now, and I'll go in reverse. And it's great. Like, you can even go 2x reverse. Oh, wow. And it's fine. If you try to do that with just the software, it's just not going to handle it. And it's just, you really need the hardware decoding to handle it. Like, your CPU alone can't really do it. In fact, here, let's do this. I'll bring up Task Manager. Yeah. And I will just hit reverse again, 2x. And what you'll see is my CPU is not super heavily loaded. It's like 20%. But the GPU is sitting around, 40% or so. Mm-hmm. And if I go to the old version, which is just software, again, we'll do 2x reverse.
Okay. Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah.
Right.
And basically, my CPU is pegged. You usually don't see 100% total CPU load, although we actually do here now. But usually you're bottlenecked by just a few cores. So it's just, that's what you gain. Hardware decoding is so much better on a GPU that you can do it and there's no problem. Like, my CPU is still pegged. Like, I'm not even doing anything. It's still just like trying to process things in the background. So yeah, it just makes a huge difference. And the really nice thing I think about this feature, because the hardware decoding was in the old versions of Premiere Pro, but you needed to have Intel QuickSync. So that is technology that is only available on certain Intel CPUs. The rule of thumb is basically if it has onboard graphics, it'll have QuickSync. Right. And that works great. It's about the same performance from what we can tell as the GPU decoding. So in that case, if you already have a system with QuickSync, this might not be all that exciting to you.
It may not be as significantly obvious, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But what's really important about this is that those CPUs with QuickSync are kind of like mid-range options. If you were like a more higher end professional, like you want to work with red footage too, but you also have to deal with drone footage that's HEVC. You have to give up that QuickSync in order to be able to process like the bigger raw files from like a red camera. So now, since you can do it on a GPU, like every system has a GPU, or at least it should if you're working in Premiere and not like on a laptop. So now, like, you can get any CPU you want. AMD's got some really nice stuff recently, the Ryzen series and Threadripper, and so now you don't have to give up performance when you're working with these kind of codecs. Similarly, a lot of I know larger post houses, they buy exclusively like Xeon CPUs, and those usually don't have QuickSync. So now you can get that great performance. You don't have to generate proxies nearly as often because even VFR media, we did some test clips with a iPhone 11, and that's a variable frame rate, which is even harder to process on top of the fact that it was HEVC, and it worked great. So it's removing the step of having to generate proxies for a large number of users.
Nice. And we're going to get a bit more. There's actually a couple questions about proxies and stuff. So I know, Caroline, we're going to get into that a bit later. So, and a couple questions too, Matt, just about, so what kind of system are you running right here, just in terms of your basic, sort of GPU spec, CPU, speed, and RAM?
Yeah, so it's actually a decent CPU or system. So it's a 10900K, which actually I will have to say then that I went into this old version of Premiere, and I did turn off hardware accelerated decoding because otherwise it would be using QuickSync and it wouldn't look all that different. But I wanted to highlight GPU decoding versus software, and the fact that my system had QuickSync, I didn't want that messing with things.
Actually, so I want to have you pause for a second there because now, Caroline, so that's actually something pretty significant in terms of people today watching this now may have a QuickSync, may have a machine that supports QuickSync. That checkbox has to be unchecked, though, to really see this benefit in 14.5. Is that right?
To see this difference, yeah. And of course, the QuickSync is only available on, I think, the i7 and the i9s. And most of the people that I work with on Twitter and in our community and now on our YouTube channel, they don't have those specs. A lot of people are on older machines. They're on, if they have an Intel CPU, then a lot of times they're on the i5. They have they have the UHD 630 graphics, and not everybody has the time or the finances to update their system because the technology, it changes so quickly, right? And every now and again you make this big leap in the tech and the processing power, and that's when it's worth it to invest. But there's a lot of people who have to bide their time. So I'm very interested in that waiting period.
Yeah. And we're probably a little bit more on the front end of technology. I mean, obviously we're a workstation manufacturer, but what we hear a lot is, again, AMD is doing a lot of really, really cool stuff. And so we hear a lot of people who either want AMD or they already had one. There's a lot of gamers out there who are starting to get into content creation. A lot of game highlights, a lot of streaming. It's a big field. Big industry.
My 8-year-old has been editing gameplay videos during quarantine. That was our little project for him. And and he's inspired by 20 somethings with 20 million followers doing it. Dan TDM and some of these guys, and it's amazing, and it's huge. It's huge business.
And what this update kind of does, because usually those kind of gaming systems, they have okay CPUs. Again, AMD is big in like the tech enthusiast world, so a lot of the people who DIY building their own computers, but they have really beefy GPUs to run these games, and so now they're not just relying on their CPU to like process. Oftentimes, terrible to edit. Footage recorded from OBS or NVIDIA Shadow Play or whatever it is they're calling it these days, because that's always going to be like VFR. It's going to be H.264. It's going to be really, really hard to edit. And now they can actually start leveraging that GPU that gives them good performance in games for editing as well. So it's a big deal.
Nice. So now this is a little bit on sort of hardware decoding. Now I know you're also going to talk a little bit about and want to show a bit around the encoding side as well. Yeah. Because this is, again, now it's funny. I was just chatting with someone the other day on Twitter, and that was their main question, which is, all right, they had an AMD based system. And I guess, and it's great that we're having this here too. Caroline, I know you must deal with this all the time, which is there's just a lot of misconception. Just because we were an early supporter of CUDA, that people think we only do GPU acceleration if you have NVIDIA-based cards. So, and that's encode, decode, whatever. So the fact that you brought up AMD, like this is something I think that needs a lot more clarification. That that's not the limitation there's not the limitation that there once was with using GPU acceleration.
And I will say though that we have done testing with both AMD and NVIDIA, and NVIDIA tends to be faster. I don't think that's really Adobe's fault. AMD just focuses more on the gaming, and so that's where they spend a lot more of the like development time on drivers and their frameworks, whereas NVIDIA has a lot more. It seems like they have a lot more interest in like workstation or content creation and all those kind of fields. So they spend a little bit more work on their CUDA framework, which I don't know. I'm not a software developer, so I don't know if it just makes it easier on the Adobe developers or if it's just inherently more efficient for these kind of tasks. But it does seem like NVIDIA is a little bit better in terms of performance, but AMD certainly works very well.
So hey, we've actually got a question here from Ziga, and I don't mean to throw this at you, Matt. Maybe this is something we could do, but he's asking, could you try putting some fast blur and some lumetri, and how does it play on your system? So maybe on that.
So I do have this is a lumetri adjustment layer. I have on here.
So you've already got that on there.
Just to
nice.
It a little bit more because it's a little bit dark. Fast blur. I don't think I've ever used fast blur.
It's a legacy one. Yeah, that used to be my go-to for a long time. Actually, it's funny. Someone brought up to me recently and on Twitter too something about fast blur, and then Caroline, this will ring some bells. Fast color corrector.
Yes.
Which I didn't even realize we even still had in the app. I think it shows obsolete now, but they're like, yeah, I'm using the fast color corrector. I don't even remember what that is. I mean, I kind of do, but it's been so long since we've had Lumetri.
So we've got Lumetri, we've got a fast blur. This is HEVC, but generally performance is about the same now between HEVC and H264. It's not dropping any frames. Let's go ahead and take it up to 2x. Still's fine. 3. So it looks like at 3x, maybe it's starting to drop.
You're getting a little, but
I mean, that still means it's playing at like 75 FPS. Yeah. So dropping a few frames is not a big deal.
Over the stream, it looks pretty buttery. So yeah. Now, what about reverse? I mean, that's always the challenge, right? So how's
1x reverse, 2x reverse. So it looks like 2x reverse. Again, it's jittering a little bit. It's hard to tell with the blur on it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. It's smoothing out the jitter. But I mean, again, even looking here over the stream, it's clear that it's multiple frames per second as opposed to the noticeable 1 frame every 2 seconds or something. Right.
Well, and this is also at full res. And this is 4K HEVC 100 megabit from a DJI Mavic. So it's not easy to process footage in the first place. And again, it's at full res. So that's pretty darn good. And looking at the load, well, this is a little old now, but my CPU was not fully loaded. Looks like GPU was getting there. So it's going to come down to your system specs. As always, if you want to do this at full res with all these effects, your system specs are going to come into play. And my system, at least from like what we sell, is kind of mid-range. I think for the average user, it's definitely high-end because it's modern. But so it's a 10900K with a RTX 2080. NVIDIA just launched some new video cards that like are amazingly fast. And AMD is supposed to launch some stuff soon that should be even faster than this too. So it's not difficult to get this level of hardware as long as you've got the budget for it. That's always the hard thing. Where do you spend your money? Do you get a new camera? Do you get lights? Do you get better sound stuff? Do you get a computer? So they're all tools.
I mean, and I know you might be slightly biased in this area, but this is something which I can remember even a couple years ago, actually it's probably almost 10, when we moved to the Mercury playback engine, which it's 2010 CS5 or 5.5 when it allowed us to play. Actually, that was the first time where you could play H.264 because everyone was so used to having to transcode in Final Cut at the time, right? Kind of in the beginning of the DSLR boom, if you remember that. And suddenly we had Mercury and you could play it in real, you didn't have to transcode it. And the main question that I think I got for 10 years was, well, yeah, but I don't know if I really want to invest in the system because I need lights and a mic and a camera and a this and a that. And my kind of feeling has always been, I mean, now to Caroline's point, the tech is constantly changing, constantly evolving, constantly getting better, sometimes worse. But right, I mean, that's with everything. But fundamentally, I mean, if the engine that you're manipulating, that you're driving, isn't powerful, right? I mean, you kind of like, yes, you want a good camera, but today you can shoot things on a phone, right? I mean, again, 10 years ago, iPhone video, not so much. Samsung video, not so much. Now, yeah, I mean, films, many of them, Sundance and everywhere. Sound, you don't want to cheap out on sound, but again, so much more accessible these days for better sounding microphones, whether they're XLR or USB. Sound devices are way cheaper, right? Even for multi-input ones than they were just a few years ago. So then you have to really look at, do I get a system that's really going to last? Knowing that, yes, there's some, I imagine, and you must hear this, like whether it's Mac or PC, there is some absolute concept of sort of planned obsolescence. I mean, these things aren't going to last indefinitely. I think we all get a little spoiled to some degree with that. I was saying the other day, I don't even know. I mean, I have like a coffee maker that's 14 years old. It's still going somehow. It's a Cuisinart, but it's still going. But it's a coffee maker, and I don't use it every day. the oldest computer that I have running now is like, it's 3 years, and already that's kind of at the edge, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm feeling like I need to upgrade. So what's your kind of answer to that when people are debating? I mean, what is your non-salesy, pitch? Yeah. Like, look, this is why you want a better system up front.
No, I mean, really, honestly, I'm going to take it from the other angle. Your computer is just a tool. And if your tool is already, doing the job for you, I mean, there's people like with Adobe, what you guys are doing with like Rush, like there's people who are just editing and shooting completely on their phone and that's it. And that's amazing that they can do that. That doesn't work for everybody. And so that's really what it is. It's what tools do you need? And, depending on what you're doing, like I still see people uploading things onto YouTube that are, 1280 by 720 or whatever it is. Like there's still people uploading in that. And that you probably don't need a huge, crazy system. Likewise, with this update, if you're just shooting with your cell phone or GoPros or something like that, again, you might not need a super beefy system. One of the great things with all this GPU accelerated decoding and encoding is that GPUs are way easier to upgrade than almost anything else in a computer. Like if you have a desktop, you can usually pop out your old GPU and pop in the new one, and it'll be fine. If you wanted to upgrade your CPU, that's a new CPU, that's a new motherboard, probably new RAMs, probably new power supply. It's basically a new computer. So that's one of the nice things with this is there's a lot lower barrier of entry to get super great performance. But if you're also someone who's working with, you want to do 8K or you want to do Red, that's when, your computer starts to become even more of a big deal for your, in your tool bag of tricks. But usually those people though, like they're already spending money on a Red camera and all this other stuff. Usually the computer isn't such a big part of the budget at that level, and so those guys oftentimes they. Like we have a few customers who just tell us like, hey, anytime you get me 10% higher performance, I'll buy a new computer. Because to them, like time is money. Like they literally will get more like jobs and more work if they can, finish a project 10% faster than their competitors. So for them, it's a business expense and it pays for itself in like 6 months.
Yeah. So. Oh, that's awesome. All right. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to switch it around a little bit. Caroline, I know because I'm actually had a couple questions about proxies. So I think we're going to cut to you. Okay. Give you the spotlight here. So I know we've had some changes and I've shown some of these on some other streams. We've kind of simplified and optimized the preset workflow. We've just kind of made it a little bit easier, but I still find in any stream where I show proxies that it's still somewhat undiscovered. For many users. So I was hoping maybe you could, first of all, just kind of show it, talk to some of the newness, but also just highlight like how easy it is, you don't have to break the creative flow. You literally can keep working. It's a one click to swap between proxy and native and kind of enlighten everybody on the goodness of proxies.
Yeah. So proxies, if you're in the chat pod and you don't know what a proxy is, it is a low resolution copy of the media that you're already editing. And it just tells Premiere, hey, like, this is the media that I shot. I can't work with it for whatever reason. Please use these until I'm ready to get the final output out there, and it'll switch back to your high-res proxies. And this used to be a really tedious process. So I have Media Encoder open right now, and you used to have to like go down here to your preset browser and create your presets, and you'd have two different choices. So first you'd have to create an encoding preset, and then after that you could create an ingest preset. But first you'd have to choose your different you'd have to choose your QuickTime formats. You'd have to choose a different preset. I choose Cineform because it's platform agnostic. It does well on PC and Mac. Then you'd have to go through, and the worst part for me is right here. You'd have to do math about for like
frame size conversions and everything.
Yeah, and sometimes you're dealing with 2K, which is like a different aspect ratio than 4K, and so so you'd have to uncheck this. You'd have to set it the way that you want, and then you'd have to select your presets. These are some test ones from last night, so you can use those. You'd have to export your presets here. You'd have to save them onto your desktop, and then you can jump into Premiere and apply them to your media. So that's changed a lot. So I set up this This is a image of me on any given Monday.
I was gonna say that's a typical editor right there. That looks
normal.
Yeah.
Here we find
I have the same photo of myself like that.
Here we find an editor in her natural habitat.
Yes.
So I have these clips. I made a little Halloween sequence, and you can kind of see I'm not using the proxies right now. And there's a long delay between, my timeline skip.
Right.
You come over here. This is the new workflow.
Yeah, and this is 2K content. I'm looking at this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, nice.
So you come over here to your project panel. You select all your clips. You right-click, proxy, create proxies. You can still choose between H.264 and QuickTime. I would really recommend QuickTime. You can choose between low, medium, and high Cineform or ProRes. If you were on a PC, you would have an option for DNX footage as well, which I would recommend. But I'm gonna stick with Cineform. You pick low res, it'll do the math for you, and it'll maintain your aspect ratio. Then you can just choose your destination. You can pick if you are, I don't know what kind of person would do this, but if you're the type of person who would want to keep every proxy you ever create into one folder, then you can, pick a specific folder. But for me, I keep my proxies on a project by project basis.
Yep, me too.
And so
that's a good practice to get into too.
Yeah, file organization is really important.
So before you go any further though, this is, and just talking about, if you could go back to the preset drop down, you mentioned the thing about the math again, because I still get this from people. I was gonna say, you could show it in that dialogue right there in Premiere. What's really significantly different now is before, all the presets had pre-configured resolutions, right? So we spelled out 15 something by 768, 1280 by like all of these. Now it just knows what to do, right? And that's the key. It doesn't care what footage you're throwing at it. You don't have to think about maintaining the same aspect ratio, frame size in a shrunken down version. This is all doing it. And really, I mean, I'm always using low as well. I guess if you need a bit more clarity, if you're doing some kind of basic color correction, perhaps on the proxy, not that you'd even need to, but I get asked a lot, like, why would I use the high res version of the proxy? Kind of defeats if I'm on a slower system. And in that case, I'm like, well, you wouldn't, right? Yeah. System's already struggling. Don't go there. It's very simple. But is there, I mean, I'm asking you this honestly, why would one want to use like the high level ProRes or Cineform proxy flavor?
I think it would be a matter of preference, honestly, and if your system can handle it. So I use the slow res option, and then I'll also I keep my proxy toggle right here in the button bar. So if you don't have this, you can click your button editor right here, and you can mouse over, and it'll show you the tooltip for all the different proxy or playback options. You can just drag your proxy to your toolbar right here, and then whenever you're toggling it on and off, you can switch in between them. So I don't use the high res proxies ever, because if I need a high res image for color correction or tweaking a very specific effect or something like that, I just disable the proxy right here.
Right. Yeah. And that, my friends, is what makes this proxy workflow awesome. Every NLE has their own flavor. And of course, you can still, we still have the ability to manually reconnect proxies if they were generated in Prelude or in Avid or somewhere else. You can manually connect things. But as far as once they're connected, everything's rolling. And if you do it all ingested natively here, it's a single button. It's a single toggle between proxy on, proxy off.
It'll add it all to this it's freaking out because I had this open. But it'll add these for you, and it'll start rendering them, right? It goes pretty quickly. And then whenever it's done creating the proxy and attaching them to the source media, you'll see it appear here in your metadata bar that it's getting attached. And as these become attached, you can start to kind of see the difference between, I don't know, it's so, it's tough to tell the quality loss on the stream. But you can definitely tell, trying to scrub here, I'm losing frames. And then if I enable the proxy,
it's buttery smooth. And that's the thing too, is now it's a little more difficult to do on the media encoder side in terms of, well, I guess you can do it still when you're building the preset. one of the things that, like, I know myself and one of our colleagues, Dave Helmley, used to show a lot is part of why we have that effects tab in Media Encoder, so that you can add an overlay, a little pin that says proxy, or your, time code, or a watermark, largely so that because a lot of times visually, especially if you're using Cineform, even at the lower bitrate setting, if you've got a shrunken window like you do here, and I work on a single monitor system, so I'm never looking at 4K and 4K. It's always, a fractional size. I forget, because it just looks the same. So, but if it says proxy, I'm like, oh yeah, that's why it's so smooth. I'm working off the 1280 version or something like that.
Yeah. And we have a ton of those overlays available in the community. Just about any proxy tutorial you watch on YouTube, they'll have a preset available for you to download. And in that preset, our community members often include some type of watermark to put onto your proxy, so that that you're not going to get them mixed up. But the good thing is that Premiere is smart enough to where when you go to export your footage, even if you have this proxy button here enabled, it'll switch back to your full res media for you. It's not gonna put you through that. So
but the new version, they added the checkbox to export with proxies, right? So you can opt into doing that, which is great. Like if you're just doing another revision for a client, you're on revision 24 or whatever. You don't have to export the entire full res, everything. And like Jason, what you're saying with like embedding time codes, that's really nice too in those kind of things. You can the proxy has it baked in, so you just export with proxies, and great.
Super awesome. By the way, so maybe Caroline, you could pull this up, because Mark brings up another great point here. In our metadata columns, which again, not everyone discovers, it's essential. You don't have to, but it's also really nice to have the metadata field in there, because then you can see when they're attached or they're offline, and just kind of the status of media as you're adding those proxies. So maybe you could show that real quickly, just how to access metadata.
Here's your project panel. Up here you have your different stats, right, for your different video files. You can move them pretty simply just by clicking and dragging. If you don't see something that you want, so this proxy column right here is not in there by design. You just right click in the space above it, right? If you right click above it, it's going to give you different options. If you right click below it, it's going to give you different options. But if you right click right in here, it'll give you the metadata display, and you have tons of options here. I don't know, the main ones I use are the proxy workflow, and you can have the file path, right? So depending on if you need to see where your proxies are being kept, those are all available here. And I just keep this one enabled, and it'll add it right there for you.
Very nice. Yep. Love that. Love that. So again, I think back to a couple of years ago where it was, the mantra at the time was kind of like everything native, always native, everything. And now, again, just as we're in this world of 4K standard, 8Ks everywhere, you've got the 12K, it's Blackmagic, right? 12K Blackmagic camera coming. It's not even out already. Pocket 12K. That makes sense. What other choice do you have? I mean, it's not even a matter of choice. It's just going to be better. When we talk about that experience, and I think Matt, this is one of Puget's. I'm going to butcher it, so you can please correct me. But you make systems that you should feel at ease using your system, right? It should be fun, and it shouldn't be a hindrance or a drag.
At the end of the day, it shouldn't get in the way. Like our goal is that you never think about your computer. Like in the end, like we don't want it to break. We don't want it to be in the way of your creative process. Like none of that. We wanted to sit under your desk and just you never think about it.
Right.
But yeah, some of these things, like even on the proxies, like you mentioned, like the higher res stuff, there's only so much you can get by throwing money at a problem in some ways. Like I think now we can go all the way up to 8K red, and you can do it, in a timeline and do it native if you wanted to. But we also have some customers who like, oh, well, I need to do multicam. And okay, well, now you're doing 4 of 8K. Right. No, I don't care if you have $1 million. It doesn't matter. The hardware does not exist to do that. So in that case, you still have to fall back on proxies, no matter what your budget is.
And I want to throw it out there. So when we had Vashi on again, so he very famously edited that film 6 Below. It was one of the first 6K, curiously 6K, shot in 6K. When he was on stream it was a laptop. It was a Dell, some very souped up Dell. but he was showing the native 6K media, you know, playing. And it was, I think he had it at half res or whatever, or quarter. Again, it's 6K with a window like this. It's wonderful. And I think we wound up even making proxies, but it's like, yeah, you can find the right system and get it configured. But right, at some point, as you said, just throwing money at it isn't really going to help it. We're just, you know, we can't do everything just yet. I mean, I always kind of relate that to just now with the promise of 5G, you know, these commercials. I downloaded an entire movie in 30 seconds. Yeah, okay.
Well, the thing is, like,
right now when 6 people have 5G, you know, but again, you know, it's taken this long to even get there. You know, there's a lot of people who are for quite some time won't see those kind of speeds in their region, wherever they live, you know?
Well, and it's, things aren't moving just on one thing, you know, at a time either. It's not just hardware is getting faster. It's also resolution is going up, bit rates are going up, quality is going up. So it's a never ending game between the two of what can you process versus what is available. Like, you know, it wasn't that long ago that everything was HD and that was it. And now, like you're saying, we have 4K, 8K, 12K. Soon, I'm sure there will be a 16K. I don't know why, but even 12K, I'm not entirely sure why. But there's always usage for those kind of things, and it'll show up, I'm sure.
Yep, very cool. All right, so maybe Caroline, did you have any more that you wanted to show in proxies, or should we get into some encoding?
Oh, I would love to see the encoding show off.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and do so we're going to switch back to you, Matt.
Sure.
And
rearrange some of this stuff.
Yeah, here. By all means. And I'm going through, by the way, we've got, thank you for everyone in the chat, all of our Adobe colleagues answering. There's so many questions going. I see we've got Mitch Wood in here. What's up, Mitch? Matt Christensen is joining us today as well. Very nice. We've got Matt Stegner in here too. Thank you, everybody. Eric Philpott, of course. By the way, I just pulled this up a second ago, and we'll pull up more links and we'll post them into the chats as well. If you want to see some different information about different hardware considerations for Premiere specifically, we've got the Puget link now on screen right now. Puget.systems/go/153830. And,
we could give you the full URL, but it would be a whole lot longer.
Yes. Anything with alphanumeric characters that don't spell out words, please. That's my favorite type of URL. Trip Catelli is with us as well. Great to see you. All right. And Anissa Thompson, sending some love from Cali. Missed you at Max, Anissa.
I missed Anissa.
Yes. Anissa, you're missed. Yeah. You're missed coast to coast.
I still got to talk to her. Anissa is one of our Adobe community professionals. So if you are in the
long-time professional, yep.
Yeah. So if you're on the community forums, there's a good chance that Anissa is the one answering your questions, and I get to talk with her sometimes. It's always great.
And that's the other thing I just want to emphasize too, you know, for everyone who's just joined, you know, we're here today to talk about accelerating editing in Premiere. We've got members from the community. We've got Caroline from AdobeCare. We've got Matt Bach from Puget Systems talking about hardware configurations. And, you know, we are sincerely all about community. This is why AdobeCare is here, to represent the fact that if you have an issue, yes, you can go to forums and you can go to user voice and other places, but if you want sort of more immediate responses, Twitter, @AdobeCare. They're amazing. We've had already a couple unsolicited comments from people in the community here now saying that they've had those experiences, but, you know, please reach out. We try and be, myself included, you know, as accessible and available as possible. And if we can't, if we don't have an answer, we're going to find you something. We're here to help you.
Yeah, we also have, it's fairly new, but we also have a YouTube channel now that I run. And so youtube.com/AdobeCare. If you don't want to talk to a person, I have days like that. You can go on there and see if you can self-help your way through it.
Yes. And future streams, we will probably simulcast to that YouTube as well. Today we're on my YouTube, Jason Levine Video, as well as Twitter, Periscope, and Facebook. But yes, I think moving forward, we're going to go there as well. So, oh, and David Bazzolto, another very well-known community member, says he's got a Puget Systems PC that's about 11 years old and still killing it. So there you go. My 15-year-old coffee maker and then 11-year-old PC. David, I don't know how you're doing it, but that just tells you right there. You've configured a system for the type of work that you're doing that's continuing to kick butt, and you've got the support of Puget behind you when things, you know, start slowing up or you need assistance, right?
Computers are computers. There are things that come up.
Right.
And honestly,
that's the best way to phrase it.
Yeah. And that's one of the interesting things that we always deal with, the whole Mac versus PC question. And again, it's all about whatever tool fits your job. But that's one of the hard things with PC is that it's so open that like you have everything from Dells and HPs and like us's, who quality is a big deal to us and reliability. And then you've got mom and pop shops who they just kind of throw something together and here you go. And then you're on your own. So that is the hard thing with PC. You've got to find the right people to go with versus Apple. True. It is just like, it's Apple. It's going to be, good.
Pre-configured and, you've got a finite amount of changes you could make, right?
But that also means, that's Apple is great because, the quality is solid. Right. The only downside really to Apple is that there's not as much choice. That's what you get with PCs. There's a broader range of choice. Usually the technology is a little bit newer just because Apple leans so heavily into the reliability and stability. But yeah, again, it's all just they're all just tools.
Yeah. Yep. The hardware maintenance is way easier on a PC as well. Mm-hmm. If you are out there and you're in the market for something, I would recommend a PC over a Mac because it's like, especially with Premiere Pro, your graphics drivers are really, really important. And the only way that you can update a graphics driver on a Mac OS is to update the entire OS. So if there's a new driver available for your NVIDIA card, but it's in a Mac machine, if there's not a new OS available, you aren't going to get that driver until there is, Right. Whereas if you're on a PC and you're having some type of visual issue in the app, maybe with the interface or something like that, you can play around with the different drivers and see if one will work for you.
Right. Another great point. All right, Matt, let's get into some encoding here because I also want Caroline to talk about other things to maintain your system for impacting performance. We've got about 15 minutes. So take it away.
Okay. So I've just shortened this down. I just have an out point right at the 1 minute mark just to kind of shorten this a little bit. I still might skip a little bit. So this is kind of the old version of Premiere. So no hardware acceleration for either encoding or decoding. I'm just using the YouTube 4K preset. Nothing is really
just the default, right? No changes.
Yep. And what I'll do is I'll bring over a little timer here. And you know what? We'll throw this up here so we can kind of look at what's going on with my system. Nice. So we'll hit export. We'll start the timer. And we'll see if we skip ahead.
Live benchmarking. It's always a little, I think Matt, actually we experienced this right when we were doing the app launch, Matt Christensen, because you may have noticed, friends who are running 14.5, Premiere launches, Caroline, I don't even 30 seconds faster average it's way faster. It's a lot faster. And I remember Matt wanting to show that before. It was either right before we released it or just after. And there's always that. Is it gonna perform how we want? And it did. It totally did it. So you're in good company doing live benchmarking right now.
Especially me running two different versions of Premiere side by side.
Yes, right. That's all right. But you know what? I love that you're doing that too because you're running the beta and the release, and this is something we talk about a lot now. Which is the apps are now designed in terms of because the betas are public to coexist on the same system. I know there have been a few people, I've seen some comments where they have issues for whatever reason. But Caroline, you can speak to this directly. In general, I think people now have good success having both installed without too many conflicts.
Yeah, I do it all the time. Okay, so that was 66 seconds to export that 1 minute. So a little bit less than real time. You can see like my CPU was 100% pegged. My GPU wasn't really doing much. Not much more than, processing this stream because I think it's also doing some of that. So then we will, I'm going to have to move these things out of the way. There we go. So now the new version, we will get this export going. It always takes a second to come up. Okay, so here we go. So this is the same settings. The only difference is I have hardware encoding on. And we will go ahead and hit go. There it goes. Okay. And if you were watching the bar, you can already see it's a lot better. And I will say too, we did a whole article on this feature when it first came out, and the highest performance gain we saw was about a 4x increase in, or decrease, I should say, in export times. So if an export was taking 2 minutes, in the new version, it was taking 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Which is amazing. But it does definitely depend on your source media, your export settings, whether you're resizing and things like that.
Sure.
So 37 seconds on that version.
And you can actually shave a few off there because you started the timer before it kicked in the export. So
yeah, well, and then
it's a little. I'd say it's a little less than half of what it was on the older version.
One of the interesting things with this is that was using the GPU for decoding and encoding. And actually, I've been playing around with this as it's come out of beta. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually do a
secret export that we didn't know you were going to do?
Yes, it is a secret one. So I'm going to send this over to Media Encoder instead. And export times between Media Encoder and Premiere are pretty darn similar. But the one thing I did here is in the preferences, I turned off accelerated decoding. So this is not going to be using the GPU for decoding. It is only going to use it for encoding. And what I've noticed is in some cases, again, I'll start this. Oops, I need a stopwatch. We'll add a couple of seconds. In fact, we should be able to see it from the elapsed time down here anyway.
Right. Oh yeah. Whoa.
So it's actually a little bit even faster doing it in this case. And it all comes down to bottlenecks because you can see here, my CPU load is much higher using the CPU for the decoding.
The decode, right.
But I'm not bottlenecking on my GPU anymore. So that was what was happening when I was doing both the decoding and the encoding on the GPU is I was starting to become GPU bottleneck. So now I shaved another 10 seconds off there. So that's, I don't want to do the math. It's probably 2.5 times faster or so. So if you do a whole lot of like transcoding from H.264 to H.264, like in this case, like this was some footage from a drone, and I'm going to upload it to YouTube. So I'm going to upload in H.264. You might want to just go ahead and set Media Encoder to not use the GPU for decoding. And that way you can get everything out of Premiere that you want while you're in the timeline, and then you're using Media Encoder to export, and it'll shave off some time. I mean, that can add up, over a long export. So that's one other thing you can do. And the nice thing about doing something like this too is you're using Media Encoder, which means you can go back into Premiere and keep editing.
Right. Exactly. By the way, Matt just pointed out that this is a great example to watch out for the trap of thinking that everything GPU is always better. Really, it's about a balanced system. And this is, I imagine, Matt, this is exactly what you're trying to educate your customers about, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's tough too. Like this is true on my system. If I had a lower end CPU, but a more powerful GPU, so like it was a little bit more balanced towards the GPU being powerful than the rest of my system, I probably wouldn't see this. It probably would be better to keep it both on the GPU. So it definitely depends on your actual computer, whether it's better or worse. So with all this stuff, I always kind of recommend that just do a quick A/B test, between a couple of different setups with one of your own projects, see how it goes, and then go from there. Because one of the other things too I should mention with encoding is there is technically a quality difference between using software encoding and hardware encoding.
Sure.
I think most people, it's more than fine, the quality difference. But if you're trying to keep like an H.264 master or something, maybe you'd want to do software. But also, if you do one of those tests, do it with your own project, look at it side by side, but also upload it to whatever service you're going to be using. If it's going to end up on YouTube, upload them onto YouTube and then look, because YouTube's going to compress the heck out of it anyway.
That's the key. And I always tell people too, because there is, and again, it's so most viewers, non-editor viewers, your audience, probably wouldn't notice nor care. When you're looking at it, though, you have to be concerned about, and a lot of it, I think the difference that you'll see in hardware, software, of course, it's going to be content dependent, right? If you've got really vibrant things happening where the color is really such an integral part of that delivery, that might be where you see some of those marked differences in the software export versus the GPU export. And also the GPU export can be different if you're switching between like CUDA or the older OpenCL or Metal, right? I mean, there's also, there's some differences between each of those flavors too. But I think it's just something that you as the editor creator have to look at and, decide this is good.
Yeah. It also does depend even on what you're using to do that hardware encoding. Like if you're using QuickSync, if you're using AMD or NVIDIA, different or not versions of the card, but like newer cards, I think look a little bit better, supposedly. I haven't done that test myself, but that's what I've been hearing. But I do know, at least between like AMD and NVIDIA, they are slightly different. When we did our test, we have an article on it, but I couldn't decide which one was better. They were just different. They were just a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. All right, so Caroline, to take us home in the home stretch now.
Sure thing.
What I thought we would do is have you share just some good practices around cache and prefs.
Yeah.
Where to find them, when to clean them, how often to clean them, all that good stuff. Because this is something that gets asked of me a lot, and it's one of those things that if you don't do it frequently, I always forget the shortcut keys to like clear prefs and cache. I always have to Google it. 20 years, I still can't remember what that shortcut is. But people who watch me regularly know I only have memorized 3 shortcuts my whole life. My brain doesn't store those. But more importantly, you already kind of alluded to this too, like graphics, drivers, all of these things. There's a lot of pieces to the optimization puzzle, right? And that's, Matt, and I think you really spelled this out well, and you did too, Caroline, which is it's not one thing. And like Matt Christensen said, it's not like GPU, you've got a 3080 or a 3090, whatever that latest card is. That doesn't mean everything's going to be zip fast and perfect and, life-changing. There's so many other pieces of the puzzle that contribute to all of those things being optimized. And the things you're going to show now kind of speak directly to that.
Yeah. So as far as the media cache goes, I think the storage is really important. Ideally, if you were working on a giant project, you would have, your main machine drive for your operating system and the applications, right? Premiere Pro and whatever else you need. Then you'd have an external drive for your media, your source footage, and then you'd have an external drive for your media cache. I don't live in that world. So what I have one external drive and it holds my source media, and then my media cache, my operating system, and my applications all go on my main machine. And the cache is a folder like anything else. It needs to be cleaned out regularly, right? You need to empty your recycling bin every now and again. And so if you're seeing playback issues, especially, or just sluggish behavior in general, clearing your cache is a great way to get around that. Another great fix is to try to reset your preferences. So in between updates, things can go wrong. Especially if you are taking a Premiere Pro project and you're converting it from a previous version of Premiere to a newer version of Premiere. Sometimes files can get corrupted and behave strangely. So it's like if you're trying to switch tools between your toolbar and it's really sluggish response times, like resetting your preferences is a good way to do that. So we have a tutorial here on how to clear your cache in Premiere Pro. I make all these videos. This is kind of an old one. And it'll walk you through the fastest way to get everything done. I swear to you, I try to make these as short as humanly possible. So we have this, and we have this entire playlist available on the AdobeCare YouTube channel. It's called Premiere Pro Support from AdobeCare. There's a reset preferences one in here as well. And it'll show you how to do this. And all you do is you hold down Control, Alt, and Shift, right? There it is. You hold them down and you launch the app and it'll reset your preferences and clear your cache for you. A little window will appear like that. You click OK and it'll do it for you. There's tutorials here on how to update your GPU drivers, right? Same thing. You go to your task manager, you find out what kind of GPU you even have, right? Because there's a lot of people that, right. Before I started working here, if I opened up my task manager and saw NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1070 Ti, I'd be like, I'm going to pretend I didn't see that,
Right. Yes, but does it allow me to edit? Right. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, of course. And so you find out what kind of cards you have. You go to the manufacturer's website or to Google, right? And you find your driver, right? So this is these are pretty simple steps, and they can be intimidating because technology does have weird names a lot of the times, right? The RTX 2080, whatever.
There's so many configurations with variations in the same name. I know it's pretty unnerving.
Yeah. And if you're overwhelmed by it, you can reach out to us. You know, I'm literally paid to be there for you. So I'm really happy to do it. I'm so happy to be an advocate for any issues that you might be having. So you can reach out to us and we'll help you out. Those are my main 3 tips: is to update your graphics drivers, keep your cache clean, and to reset your preferences regularly if you're seeing any type of preference issue, customization issues with workspaces or keyboard shortcuts or things like that.
Yeah, those 3 things are probably daily occurrences with our support team, because our support guys, they really like to remote in and just do these things for a lot of our customers. A lot of our customers prefer that. And yeah, every day it's kind of those kind of things. I think they've even gotten to the point where we have some little bat files that just clear the preferences, just because it's the same thing every time. That way they don't have to remember those Control Alt command, whatever it was. I don't even remember already. The one thing I kind of wanted to comment too is now you have this isn't much of a choice on like a laptop or an Apple, but what we oftentimes do with like the cache files is we like to try to get people into a 3-drive setup, just like you were talking about, your OS drive, a projects drive with like your media and stuff, and then we usually try to have a dedicated drive that all it is for your cache. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is it makes clearing your cache really easy. You just go in that drive, you select everything, you hit delete, done. The other reason is that solid state drives that everything is pretty much using these days, it has a limited lifespan based on how many writes are to the drive. And cache files oftentimes are making a whole lot of writes, a lot more than like, copying over your media and then it just sits there. So we also kind of like that because then it puts all of these temporary cache files that are going to shorten the lifespan of your drive on one drive. So if that drive fails, it should be the first drive to fail out of anything, 5-10 years down the line. And all you lose is your cache files. I'm like, who cares? You just reset your cache even to your OS drive temporarily until you can replace it. And it's a hiccup. It's not now my OS drive is gone. And now I can't do anything.
Right. So actually, Caroline, while you've got this GPU thing on screen, so this just occurred to me, and Francis actually just reminded me, because we talked about this the other day, the system compatibility report.
Yeah.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, where that checkbox is and prefs, what that means, because there's been recently, I've seen a few, I won't say thousands, a few of people who've run into this this somewhat intimidating dialog box that can pop up.
Yeah, it can be intimidating because it's telling you that a piece of your computer doesn't work. And I think a lot of us get kind of intimidated by that, right? But it's not broken. It just needs maintenance. And so I don't have it because all my stuff is up to date, but it'll be a little error window that says this GPU is not supported, or this driver is not supported, and it'll have a little blue button next to it that says fix. A lot of people do not hit that fix button, and instead they click the X and they just close out of it because they don't want to see it. If you click fix and you're on a PC, it'll take you through that GPU update workflow that I was just showing the video tutorial for. If you're on a Mac, it'll take you to your OS settings, I think. But if you know that you're on the latest graphics drivers and that is still appearing, and that it's just that your GPU is old or whatever it is, you can disable that. So on a Mac, it's under Premiere Pro Preferences General, and on a PC, it's under Edit Preferences General. And it's just this second from the bottom checkbox. It says show system compatibility issues at startup. And this is just the scan that we send through your system to let you know that everything's working okay. And if something's less than ideal, then we let you know about it. But if you already know and you don't want to hear it anymore, you can just uncheck that button and click OK. And it won't show up again whenever you reopen the app.
Nice.
Yeah, I know we've had a few times, even recently, especially if you're updating to a very new version. We have a few times where it's not Adobe's fault, it's no one's fault, except Windows Update will sometimes push a older driver. So it'll actually downgrade your driver. And so sometimes that'll pop up and yeah, you can update your driver, but then like next week, Windows Update pushes the old driver again. And usually it works itself out after a few weeks. So if you do see it like coming back up, especially with like Intel GPU drivers, sometimes, yeah, just kind of be okay with it and then it'll sort itself out.
That's a great point.
Yep, and I'm pulling up Francis just actually wrote here. So, and you can show this if you want to, Caroline. Yeah, you can run the system compatibility report anytime from the help menu. So a lot of times, I haven't seen it on my recent systems, but I don't know if it happens on a project basis or on startup. I can't remember, but you can always run it and check for it. Yeah, let's see what yours comes up with. Yeah, nothing, no conflicts to report. So that's ultimately what you want to see. But again, when you kind of see that with red text, it's just, it's like everybody is kind of, well, maybe not kids now and being remote learning, but I know I'm still slightly scarred from teachers with red pens on in school.
Thank you. I'm glad.
It's weird. Yeah. Oh, fully. We're, it took years to get over that. Okay, cool. Okay, so we've got graphics drivers, clearing cache, updating preferences. Anything else you wanted to kind of share around? Yeah, I love how we got into the proxies, the button editor, having a lot of those things accessible. I'm trying to think if there's something else that we're forgetting here.
I think those are the basics. Anything, if you've tried those things and you're still seeing issues, please reach out to us, because it's that sounds like it's something to be solved one-on-one. A lot of general problems can be fixed with those 3 steps, and a lot of problems can be fixed by using proxies, especially if you're, I shoot 4K on my phone. Like, I don't own a professional camera. I don't own a Red or a Sony A7S III or anything like that. And I still use proxies when I'm editing my my HEVC footage from my iPhone, and it really does give me a much smoother experience.
Nice. Matt, I've got another question for you. What's a suggested SSD size for a cache drive? Actually, this is for you and Caroline.
Yeah. Usually,
curious if you have similar thoughts on this.
Yeah. We serve a lot more of the higher end market. So we usually end up doing like a 512 gig cache drive. Some of that is just because the pricing difference between like a 512 and a 256 is not much. And I probably wouldn't go lower than 256. A lot of brands don't even have 256 gig drives anymore. No. So we usually do just like a 512 gig drive because they're so easy to clear. In fact, I don't remember when it was added in Premiere. They added the auto deletion of cache. So you can go into your preferences and you can set it to like after a certain number of days or after a certain size, it'll clear your cache. And that's nice too, especially if you have a limited drive space. You can set it to only have 100 gigs of cache, and it'll clear out old stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, I'd corroborate that as far as the 512 gigabytes being plenty of room. I don't like doing this type of maintenance, right? I want to. Everybody wants to avoid it as much as they can, so I do typically just go for the terabyte. And call it good. If you do want to adjust those media cache settings as well, those are also under preferences, which is the same place that you turn off the system compatibility report. So you go to this media cache preferences, and you can see the media cache management section, and it'll show you automatically delete folders older than 90 days, right? You can also set it based on storage for the same effect.
Yeah. The other thing too with all this is it comes down to workflow. Like if you also use After Effects a lot, having a bigger drive for your disk cache is huge. Like that's a giant deal. So in that case, get like, usually it's as big as you can. Get 2 terabytes. There's 8 terabyte drives now. Like, sure.
Someone just asked that actually, and I was going to say, when you use an SSD, heck, I've even used like, removable like XD media for the After Effects disk cache, but it's significant. It's amazing. It's crazy how much, and now with people having seen what we're introducing with this new 3D design space in After Effects, it really feels like we're getting to kind of a very real-time environment there,
And with After Effects too, Premiere, I don't think it's as big a deal that the cache files are on like a super duper fast drive, like an SSD is great. After Effects though, we generally try to get people onto what are called NVMe drives. They are way faster. SSDs are half a gig a second. NVMe drives, most of them are about 4 gigs a second. Now they have new drives that are like 8 gigs a second. That's a little extreme. You don't really need those. But with After Effects, a lot of it is just how many of those frames can you write to the disk cache, and the faster your drive. It's not linear by any means, but having those faster drives, even if you just only write a few more frames before your RAM preview or RAM cache is having to get cleared, it's worth it.
So one last, because we're just about at time here, and this is kind of a general question for you, Caroline.
Sure.
So Ron Sussman was asking, so he's curiously experienced some playback issues and frame drops in 14.5, rolled back to 14.4, everything is fine. So again, not trying to throw you on the spot, but I've seen 1 or 2 posts about this where sometimes people aren't seeing those performance gains when that's kind of the theme of the update. So any suggestions around that? I mean, what would you probably tell someone via AdobeCare if that's kind of the experience, and rolling back to the previous one is better?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I would ask if it was project specific or if it was on all types of projects. I would ask if it was on a specific type of media, right? So iPhone media, or if it's on, if it's on your JPEGs too, like, so there's lots of questions there. It could also be because a project was converted from a previous version, although I do think the dot versions are compatible now. My first workaround, if you've already checked your drivers, cleared your cache, and reset your preferences, would be to create a new project file in Premiere and then import this project that you're having trouble with into the new fresh file. And if that doesn't work, then we'll have to take a closer look one-on-one. But that's a nice little, you kind of remake the bed for Premiere to like lay its head on whenever you set up that new project and put a troublesome one into the new one. You can get around some stuff that way.
That's actually a really great fix. I think, in fact, Vashi, again, I think he showed some of that too. Because again, some of the projects he was showing were several years old, and opening up the native project may have been problematic. Importing it into a new project, suddenly things kind of worked and linked back together, which is another thing that people often forget, that you can open Premiere projects and select sequences from within Media Browser in Premiere. So you can have multiple projects open. People forget that we do this. We've had this now for several years. And I think actually we premiered it at IBC 3 years ago or something like that, quite some time ago. I was less gray. I just remember that. Okay. Well, everyone, this has been so wonderful. We've really maintained an amazing audience. So much going on in all the various chats. Thank you so much. Caroline, thank you. Again, for anyone watching, you can ping Caroline at AdobeCare. We've also got in the chat here. And Eric, if you want to post the link for the YouTube channel again, I'll pull it up on screen. What is it again, Caroline? It's youtube.com/AdobeCare. Is that
it's just AdobeCare. That's our handle on Twitter. It's our YouTube handle. It's a place to be.
Awesome. And Matt, again, from Puget Systems, thank you so much. And I want to remind everyone, we'll have all of the links that I was pulling up on screen in the descriptions. I'm going to go back and add all of those into the descriptions on Facebook and YouTube. Of course, you can also read. Matt, what is your Twitter handle?
Oh, I think it's Puget_Matt Bach.
All right, I'll verify that for you too. I'm just checking.
I don't look at my own Twitter handle very often.
I know. Yes. No, you're just at Puget Matt Bach.
Oh, at Puget Matt. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Also, a lot of the stuff, like my Twitter, I don't need to do a huge amount on, but all of the testing and articles I do, if you go to PugetSystems.com, up at the top nav bar, there's a publications tab, and that's where we put all of the testing we do. And none of it's behind a paywall or a registration wall or anything. It's all just there. And definitely down one of the sides, there's like a filter, and filter by like Premiere Pro, because there's a lot of content there. Like, I don't know how many video editors are also into like CAD or scientific computing and stuff. So they might want to filter that down to Premiere.
Nice. Well, this was wonderful. And thank you so much. Thank you for, just being wonderful providers and services of the community, fresh faces for the community. This is really what Adobe Video is all about. This is what we're all about. And for everyone watching all over the world, thank you so much. We'll be back with another guest-filled stream in just a couple of weeks. Always new things coming in the digital video and audio apps. So stay tuned for that right here on Adobe Video. We're also going to be revisiting some of these videos on AdobeCare. This one will be posted to AdobeCare later in the week. So until next time, have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you again next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching.
Bye.